Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and welcome to our first look at the Chaos Diamond DA40 NG. The NG has just been released by Chaos as a free update for owners of the previous DA40 XLS package, and it delivers a brand new engine that is now FADEC controlled, which also comes with quite some changes to the cockpit controls of the aircraft. Another major change with the DA40 NG is that you now have a very different fuel system consisting of a main and an auxiliary tank rather than the previous left and right tanks. Apart from that, there have also been quite some changes to the menus available in the airplane and the options, which I'm looking forward to show you on today's flight. Now, we're currently standing here in Echo Delta Lima Delta, which is Dienstlaken Schwarze Heide, the airfield where I did my PPL back in the day. We are going to be heading out for a local flight to do a little bit of air work, some pattern work, and get comfy with the airplane, and of course do our 3 takeoffs and landings, which are required to be allowed to transport passengers. Really looking forward to this, but without any further delay, let's get straight into the airplane. So you will immediately notice that there are a couple of changes to the cockpit controls. For instance, we now have our engine controls on the lower left, including the FADEC controls, and the prop and mixture levers have been removed in favor of just the power lever or the throttle in this airplane. Apart from that, we also have some changes to the fuel system down here, since we now only have a normal and an emergency setting, but I'll be talking about these a little bit when we actually get in flight. Now, let's go ahead and get going with the first look at one feature that I do really like, and that's the checklist feature of the airplane. And when you go to the aircraft and checklist tab, and then down here to the post-flight, you can see this tips and help tab that has been added to the airplane, and this includes a lot of very useful tips for flying the aircraft. For example, how can you start the headphone simulation? How do you have to do the warm-up of the engine? What about the startup? How about your takeoff? How about your traffic pattern? It tells you exactly. On the downwind, 45% power, abeam the threshold 20%, flaps takeoff, 85 knots. On final, you'll need an average 35% with a landing flaps and 77 knots, and so on. So lots of very useful pieces of information that you can get in these tips and helps tab of the checklist that are definitely worth studying when you fly this airplane. But now let's actually start with the before engine start checklist and get our airplane going. So the elevator trim is in neutral, power lever idle, parking brake set, and yes, it still catches me that the parking brake set position is kind of at the bottom down here versus the upper part, but that's how the real airplane works, just a little bit confusing in my opinion. Alright, alternate air is closed, avionic and essential buses are off. Alternate static source is closed, engine master and fuel pump switches are off and off. Then all lights are off. Circuit breakers, those are best viewed from the side, are all in. Then the flap selector is in the up position, the fuel transfer and pitot switches are off. And the electric master, which is down here in the middle. No, that's not the ignition, that's the electric master over here. Can go on. Alright, now let's wait for our G1000 to power up. And here we go, we'll press enter straight away, and you can straight away see the different engine instrumentations that you have in the DA40 NG. Basically, because we now have different controls, we also need different parts of information up here, which is exactly what it shows you now. Alright, next up we'll check the flight controls, which give us full throttle. We'll silence the warning up here, and then we can test the flaps. So flap lever down, and we can see that they're actually moving properly. Alright, so a little hard to see, but we can see the landing light is somewhat illuminated down there. Then flaps back up, let's also check them on this side. And that's moving perfectly, nice. Alright, and that's then fuel quantity and temperatures. So 13 gallons left, 11 gallons right. That's just about fine, and then we can just set those gallons over here as well, 24 in total. Here we go, 24 gallons, and we can reset the fuel. Used, almost. Alright, so 24 gallons, here we are. Perfect, and that's the before engine start checklist complete, so let's go ahead with the engine start checklist. So, doors and canopy are closed, anti-collision light is on, power lever is checked to be in idle down here, propeller area is clear, then engine master on. We'll wait for the glow light to go off. Here we go. And electric master or engine master to start. Alright. So, oil pressure is here. Oil temperature is still gonna come. Electrical voltage is checked. And with that, we've completed the engine start checklist. So let's go to the after engine start checklist. Oil pressure checked. RPMs 710 plus minus 30. Is it 30? Yeah, it is. Alright, lights as required. Pitot heat comes on, indication goes out, and then we can switch it back off again and just cancel the sound. Alright, transponder is on 7000 and standby, that's already looking good. Altimeters, so field elevation is 213. Let's make sure that that is roughly set down here. Yep, 1014. Alright, looking good. Standby Ryzen. Caged. We don't need to check the autopilot just now. FMS setup is basically completed. So I'm gonna do is... Alright, we've got Echo Delta Lima Delta in here. I'll set the same thing as destination, just to make it easy. And here we go. Alright. So that's our FMS setup set, and flaps into the takeoff position. And here we go. Alright, after engine start checklist complete. And the taxi checks will be taxi light on, park and brake release, brakes check, flight instruments check, that's it. Alright, easy going. So let's turn on the taxi light. Park and brakes coming off. A little bit of power to get moving. Not that much power. So brakes are checked. We'll disregard that strange device on our right side here. Alright, and here we go. Now, what's a little bit strange to me here is that they don't turn the avionic master on earlier. Or did I just miss it in the checklist? I probably did. Let's just check that once more. Yeah, avionic master on. I missed that one. Alright, that's fine. That's down on me then. So, for those of you who are new to the COWS DA40 or DA42 series, the DA40 does, in the real world, not have a steerable nose wheel. For this reason, in the real world, you only steer it using differential braking. Now, the COWS DA40 taxis really nicely with that. However, for those of you who don't have differential brakes for some reason, there are a couple of options of what you can do. So let's just stop the airplane over here. So going back to the engine page, if you then go onto menu, you can see up here there's a lot of simulation options over there. So scrolling down here, we do, for example, have the steering mode. I'm using realistic over here, which means I have to use my differential brakes. But looking over here, you can see you can actually change this to auto brakes and nose wheel steering. So that way you kinda are able to simulate the airplane as if it had a normal nose wheel steering versus the differential braking that you would have in the real world. And this is one of the changes of the current update, as it just makes things a little bit easier and nicer for you to use. But if you want full realism, then you still have that available. Now, let's go ahead and taxi to runway 26. We've got about 20 knots of headwind today, which is going to make it very interesting to do a couple of traffic patterns today. And perhaps a little bit of a local area flying and air work. The wind certainly makes it pretty interesting to actually taxi the aircraft, as we kind of always need some small corrections there with the toe brakes, which you can kind of see by the airplane tipping forward a little bit whenever I do an input. Now there is a little bit of up and down that comes with the airplane by default that you can see just now. Now I'm not doing any inputs, but now I'm doing a little input there, and now I'm doing one. So you can kind of see how the airplane taxis. And I gotta say, I do like this. In the real world it is of course a little bit easier, but then again in the real world you do have all that feel of your airplane, you have all the clues of the airplane moving that are just almost impossible to see in a flight simulator. So in the real world it's of course a little bit easier. Alright then, let's take it a little bit around the corner, and then we're just gonna stop it over here so that we can do our run-up. So, park and brake is set, and then let's go for the before takeoff checklist. So park and brake is set, the doors are checked closed, circuit breakers are still all in, power lever is on idle, engine temperatures, the oil's still got to warm up a bit, so let's give it like 1,200 RPMs. We can go up to 1,300 if we want to get the airplane to warm up a little bit quicker. And again, that kind of information is also available down here in the tips and helps. You can see for warm-up it needs idle for 2 minutes, thereafter you can use up to 50% load. That is legal, but then again you'll be the idiot standing on the apron with your props running at 2,000 RPMs. You'll have to know if you want to do that. But as you can see, the oil temperature is now warm enough anyway already, so we can skip that and go straight into the next part of the checklist. So engine temperatures are checked, then we got the voter switch, which we are going to switch from A to auto to B to auto. That's the switch on the left side here, which basically selects the channel of the FADEC that's in use. So now you can see by going to up, we lost a little bit of power for a moment, so that means it's been on B on auto first. Let's go back to auto, you can see the same thing happen down there. I go to ECU B, you can see no change because it's operating on B automatically. Now, why is that? Basically because I've done one simulator session with this beforehand, and the auto mode cycles between the two every time the aircraft is shut down and started again. Okay, so voter switch A auto B auto. Now we can do the ECU test. For that we are just going to hold the ECU test button down here. We get both the ECU A fail and ECU B fail, and you can see it's automatically conducting the runner. Then it goes back to idle. Now it's switching the channel, and then it will do the same thing again on the other ECU channel. Like this. Alright, and that's the run-up completed. So then, fuel pump on. The reason we left this off earlier is that the fuel pump is also automatically checked during the ECU test, and then trim, flaps, flight controls checked. So trim is neutral, flaps are takeoff, and flight controls are checked. Beautiful, and that's the before takeoff checklist complete. So approach area is clear, we didn't hear anyone on the radio, so let's go for the lineup checklist. Lights on, transponder on alt, pitot heat on. So park and brake released, approach sector clear, runway is identified, and then we'll do the max power check. Now the max power check is an interesting one because you are going to get that information from a table in the manual. So let's have a very quick look at that before we do the lineup. We can see that over here from the product manual. And this is the minimum load with maximum throttle. So we're at an elevation of almost zero, at temperatures around 20 degrees centigrade. That means we need 96% power minimum when we apply takeoff thrust. Alright. So with that done, we could do the check here. I'm kind of a fan of doing it on the runway, just because the runway is built for high power applications. The taxiways around it, especially if you're standing not exactly straight on the center line, are not necessarily made for high power applications. There may be something behind you that's not really supposed to be there, or not really supposed to be exposed to prop wash, so we can do it either way. Alright, cool. So with that we're basically ready to go. Two small things. synchronize the heading to the runway heading, set the traffic pattern altitude of 1200, and then we'll prepare the timer for our takeoff. Alright, and with that we're ready to go, so let's start the timing. Then we'll set power. Remember, we need at least 96%. Keep it on the center line. Alright, power is set, the load goes all the way up to 100, perfect. Knots. Rotate. So 7.5 degrees pitch. Should stabilize at about 74 knots. We probably rotated a little bit quicker, that's why we only get 72, but overall looking pretty good. So remember, field elevation 200, that means at 600 feet on the altimeter we are 400 above the ground, and that's my moment to retract the flaps, turn off the fuel pump, and reduce power to climb power, which is 92% load. Alright, set. So then we'll climb straight out. I'm accelerating to VY, which is going to give us the best rate of climb here, and then we'll take the airplane up a little bit. Small turn to the left to get clear of the traffic pattern here. And then we're climbing past the pattern altitude now. I'm going to take it a little bit higher, say 2,000 feet, so that we've got a little bit of air underneath our aircraft. And then we're going to start with a little bit of air work, which is going to be steep turns as well as some stalls. So, beautiful view outside of the Ruhr area, which is the most densely populated area in all of Europe, with about 10 million inhabitants on that mass of land. Now, looking out here, you can kind of see what it's famous for. Lots of industrial production facilities and basically loads of industry, especially around the river Rhine, which is straight ahead of us. And you can see how all those factories are located just about at the Rhine. Alright then, so we're reaching 2,000 feet. Let's go ahead and reduce our load a little bit. We don't intend to do cross-country flying, so I'm just going to go for about 50% load in order to save a little bit of fuel. Now, as we're doing that, let's go ahead and start with a little bit of air work. And I'm going to start with some steep turns. So we are going to get ourselves level in 2,000, and once we're there, it'll be 45 degrees angle of bank, going all the way left and all the way right for a full circle. So the heading buck is matched, we're in 2,000. And this is a very good exercise to practice your control of the airplane. So let's get into this. 45 degrees of bank, a little bit of power when you go through 30 degrees. And now we can practice the instrument scan, we can practice our control of the airplane. The goal is to maintain the altitude while maintaining a precise bank angle and basically keeping all the values frozen right there on the flight instruments. Very nice. And then let's do the same the other way around. So 45 degrees angle of bank, maintain 2,000 feet. I can tell you one thing, in the real world, this is a fun exercise, because you have quite the G-loading when you do this. If you do like roller coasters, you are gonna like this type of flying. Alright, and then we can roll wings level once again on the heading 235 as we had intended. Here we go. Power back to 50%, looking excellent. Alright, next up let's do a little stall exercise here. So we are going to reduce power to idle, and something you will notice, when going below about 20% of load is that the RPMs are going to increase a little bit. And this way you can build up quite a bit of drag. Very useful if you need a quick descent. Alright, so the trim should be set to the middle position for this. Alright. And here's the stall warning, so lower the nose a little bit to unload. A little bit of power, and here we go. Lost 70 feet, totally fine. Alright, now let's do the same thing in an approach configuration. So, flaps to takeoff, flaps to landing. Let's ensure we maintain 2000. And once we're level in 2000, we can do the same thing again. Okay. So we're in 2000, idle thrust. And here we go. Stall warning. Pitch down. Add power. And here we go. Nicely recovered. Now let's do an actual power on stall. We'll go full power. Pitch 15. Let's see what's going to happen. Let's actually keep pulling, pulling, pulling. Yeah, now you can feel the airplane buffeting, which cows have really simulated nicely. And if we now pull a little bit more, like this, that's when you lose it.
Ship rate, pull up.
Right. Here we go. That was an interesting one. Let's do the same thing with the flaps up. So 15 degrees pitch. We need to ensure we don't climb above 4,000, but I don't think we're going to get there. That's because there's the controlled airspace of Düsseldorf and 4.5 at this position here. Alright, now we kind of have it right on the edge of the stall, and if we pull a tiny bit more, that's when you lose it.
Ship rate, pull up. Pull up.
Alright, very nice. So we're back in 2000, let's reduce the load down to 50% again. And as you can see, the plane just flies really beautifully. It's a good load of fun flying it like that. Alright then, let's go for some pattern work. So, power to idle. There's our airfield over there. We do have quite the strong wind up here today, 34 knots. That's why we barely moved while flying westbound, and while we are so quickly back into the traffic pattern. But that's how it's fun, isn't it? So, let's quickly go over the traffic pattern. Honestly, the in-flight checklist's not all that much stuff to do, but we can go ahead, turn on the fuel pumps, we keep the pitot on, and that's about it, honestly. So, the interesting thing for us to remember for the traffic pattern is what we can see down here in the tips and tricks. And that's going to be down here, traffic pattern. On downwind, 45% power, a beam, the threshold 20%, flaps takeoff 85 knots, on final 35%, flaps landing 77 knots. Alright, so with that in mind, let's go down into the pattern altitude, which is 1,200 feet, which I've just descended below. Lovely. So let's just climb back to 1,200. And then we'll go straight into the pattern. Alright, so we're on 1,200 now. We'll set the load to about 45%. Here we go. Our airfield is straight ahead. We can see it over here. And then there is a little building, that's that one over there, which marks the downwind position. Okay, so let's turn downwind. And we'll almost be at the beam position straight away. So let's reduce our power to 20% here. Flaps takeoff. Pretty strong winds, you definitely do notice those. And we are getting a little bit high. We nicely maintain those 85 knots. Since we're a little bit high, I'll already go to landing flaps. Alright, here's our downwind position. 77 knots is what we should be flying. Then we turn base beam the road over here. Normally we are not meant to overfly the road, so this is looking pretty good. There's our runway, and it does have a display threshold for single engine aircraft, which is about here. So don't worry if the approach looks very high. This is actually intentional over here at this airfield. So let's get down into a nice altitude to fly the pattern. And turn final. Nice and steady. We do have the wind that's gonna push us a little bit. Alright, our altitude's looking good. So we should need a load of about 35%, which is now set. And look at that. So our aim is to touch down about here. A beam that slightly brighter grass down there. And that looks wonderful, doesn't it? So, as we're getting close to the runway, let's pull off the power. Flare. Decrap. Nice. Okay, so flaps back into takeoff. The trim is roughly at the takeoff position. Add power. 66. Rotate. And 7.5 degrees pitch. Looks beautiful. So the wind is slightly cross. We can absolutely work with that. Wonderful. So that was our first touch and go. Let's try the same thing. Next time we want to approach a little bit lower than we did this time. We started the descent a little bit late on the pattern there. And we can absolutely do that better. So passing 600. Load set to 92. Flaps up. Fuel pumps off. Maintain the pitch at about 7.5. And you can see it's naturally reaching VY over there. Alright, so turning upwind. And that's looking good. So the downwind is about here. Just north of that road. Runway is at 26, so 170 degrees for the downwind is good. In the sim, or in the real world, you can easily see the construction building, or not construction buildings, but those buildings over there. In the sim it's a little bit more difficult, but not too problematic. Right, so roughly 45% we should have. I'm using 40 here since we climbed a little bit too high. And here we go for the downwind. There's our building. Alright, so let's reduce to 20%. I generally have a feeling we are a little bit lighter than what we'd normally be because we don't have a second person on board. For this reason we need a little bit less power than what we normally would. Alright, fuel pumps on, flaps on takeoff. And that's wonderful. Now we're in roughly 1200. Alright, so let's pull the power. Flaps to landing. And here we go. 77 knots. Let's get her descending. everything's clear on that left side. We are not overshooting the road. That's excellent. Coming a little bit fast here, let's correct that. And it is definitely a little bit windy right now. You can see how we're flying like here. Alright, let's turn final. Speed is looking good. Let's increase the load to 35. Or let's try 30 since we are a little bit lighter than what we normally plan to be. And the wind is nicely pushing us onto the center line. Looks great. So again, we aim to touch down over here. Nice and stable. Beautiful. In general, the flight model of those Chaos aircraft is just fantastic. They feel about the closest to real aircraft that I've felt in the sim. Alright, now let's reduce to idle. You can really feel how the airplane starts to drop when you reduce your power to idle. And touchdown. Alright, flaps back into the takeoff position. Let's do one more. Power set. 67, rotate. Okay, so this time we are going to do the spot landing. That means we will climb up to 2,000 feet of altitude, and then we are going to bring the engine back into idle, and then we'll aim to glide all the way in. And basically when we've done all of those maneuvers, then we are safe to carry passengers as well. Okay, so we're reaching 600, flaps are coming up, power down to 92, and that's looking beautiful. Then we can turn the fuel pump off, and now we've got to climb to an altitude of 2,000 feet. We'll just set up here. Alright, so we're up at VY, which is the best rate of climb speed. This time I'm going to keep us a little bit closer to the field. Basically we want to get over the landing runway threshold at an altitude of 2,000 feet above the ground, so that is 2,200 on the altimeter. And when we are there, we'll cut the engine and then glide ourselves all the way in. Now, let's see, we do have an advisory down there, which is fuel transfer. That's basically an automatically programmed reminder for us to use the fuel transfer system every now and then. Right now, though, we can see that we still have about the same amount of fuel left and right, so there is no real reason to do this just yet. But since fuel is only drawn from, or is primarily drawn from the main tank, which is the left-hand tank on the DA40 NG, we do need to use the transfer pump every now and then to transfer fuel from the right into the left tank. That's one of the changes between the DA40 NG and the DA40 XLS that cows have, of course, simulated with this airplane. I'll show you how that's done in a few moments. But now let's do the spot landing first. So that's 200 to go. Alright, we'll get ourselves above the runway threshold. We have a lot of wind up here, 30 knots, so we gotta keep that in mind when we are gliding back to the field in a few moments. So let's maintain that altitude. Alright, so we're basically pretending that we're in a normal cruise scenario, and at some point the engine will just quit. coincidentally, that point will of course be right above the landing runway threshold. So we just gotta have a look at where that is. And yeah, we're approximately above it right now. So let's go to idle. Then we check the fuel pumps on. Well, and then let's get going. So we'll maintain VY during the maneuver. And basically we are now flying a standard traffic pattern, but one that is going to bring us nicely onto the runway. You can, however, see how quickly the airplane descends. That's 1,000 feet a minute. So if we were to fly standard rate 1 turns, we would basically touch the ground once we're back on the runway heading. So keep that in mind. Keep close to the landing runway. We can see the threshold over there. Maintain a nice speed. And here we go. On the downwind we lost 1,000 feet, so there is not much margin to fly it back to the field for us today. So let's start the left-hand turn back already. Keep the speed. And you can see what the wind is doing to us here. Alright, so maintain the 90 knots. And we are just about making it to the threshold here. That's why it's so important to take the wind into account. But this is looking quite good, actually. Alright, now let's get out some flaps. You can immediately feel the ballooning here. Alright, and welcome back to Dienstlagen. Well, and that's about everything we have to do over here. So with that, we now got 3 takeoffs and landings on the airplane, which means we are now certified to carry our family and friends with it again. And then we can vacate the runway to the left-hand side. I think you guys have gotten the impression about the DA40 by now. It really is a fun airplane to fly. So second exit for us. Oh, come on, keep rolling please. Alright, so as mentioned, it is really a fun airplane to fly. Now, cows are just doing awesome flight models. The sounds are great as well, though. It's really worth mentioning that. The sound package is of course done by Boris, and you really see how awesome it is. They have recorded on real aircraft, and it shows. It just really shows. Alrighty, so we're vacating the runway. Let's just quickly stop over here for a moment to do the after landing checklist. And while we're on it, we'll also stop the timer. Here we go. Okay, cool. So, after landing checklist. Flaps are coming up. Pitot heat off. Alternate air closed. Transponder off. And fuel pump off. Lights set, and that's the after landing checklist complete. Alright then, let's taxi back to our parking position. And when we're reaching the parking position, before shutting the airplane down, I will show you a very quick trick of the fuel system of the DA40. So let's vacate to the left-hand side over here. Well, vacate, it's not really vacating, but let's taxi to the left-hand side. And you can see how there's some ground staff over there already. Now, in the real world, they're parking the airplane a little bit different than what the parking spots in the scenery say. So in the real world, you would taxi in across the line. I'll just be going around those ladies over here. So you taxi in like this, and you turn the airplane to either side, left or right, and then you can park it over there. Pretty much like this. Alright, and here we are. So, parking brake is set, and now a little thing for the fuel system here. Since in the DA40 NG you have basically a main tank and an auxiliary tank. The main tank is on the left wing, the auxiliary tank on the right wing. You are mostly drawing fuel out of the main tank. So what you need to do occasionally is to use the fuel transfer pump over here, which now transfers fuel from the auxiliary into the main tank. So that way you will see that the level on the right side is now dropping and the left side is increasing. And that is how you are balancing the fuel on this aircraft. And that, by the way, was also the reason why you saw the left tank a little bit higher than the right one before we started today's flight. Alright, so we're now at the parking spot, so let's go ahead and shut her down. Parking checklist. Parking brake is set, engine cooldown, we've idled for a minute. Avionic master off, lights except strobes off. Electrical consumers are basically all off over here. So, engine master is off, electric master off, strobe light off, and cabin lights are all off. And that's our parking checklist complete. So with that, my friends, welcome back to Dienstlaken. I do hope you enjoyed this little show around the Chaos DA40 NG. Again, it's the same package as the XLS now. If you've bought via OrbX, you simply need to find the new product in your OrbX Central. You just buy it again, but it's for free if you already have the previous version, so that way you can obtain the latest version of the DA40 series, as it's now called. So, thank you very much for flying along, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments underneath the video. As always, like, comment and subscribe, and if you are really loving what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.